Shabbat Shalom, Brickworks family. My name is Sasha. In recent weeks, we've been looking at the mission of God, the mission of Yahweh in various aspects of Scripture. I know we've looked at Noah and some of the prophets. This week, we're going to look at the mission of Yahweh in the Psalms. The Psalms, it's the hymn book of the Bible. Psalms are sacred songs or sacred hymns, and this is a collection of them. There are 150 in the Bible, and you only find it in the middle of the Bible. In Hebrew, the word is there. It is called Tehillim or Hasefer Tehillah, which means the book of the collection of songs or songs of praise. And like I said, there are 150 of them all in total. Now, unlike other books of the Bible, they aren't written by one particular person. There are several authors who scribed the Psalms over a space of time. They were written over a 1,000-year period between the times of Moses and the time of Ezra, who was in Israel after the children of Israel had been in Babylonian captivity and they returned. That's the times of Ezra. So 150 Psalms. Now, we know that David is ascribed with having written 73 of them, King David. Solomon wrote some of them. Moses wrote 10 of them, or 11. Psalm 90 to Psalm 100. Asaph, who was a Levite in the times of David, wrote some of them. The sons of Korah, who were related to Moses, wrote some of the Psalms. Psalm 139 is ascribed to Adam, and then there are a couple of other characters that wrote them in the time of David and possibly later in the time of Moses. And then there are 48 that we don't know. There's no title, there's no name given who wrote them, so they're anonymous and we don't know who wrote them. It could have been any one of those that I've just mentioned, but we don't know. So 1,000-year period written down. We don't know who collected them together as they stand today, but here we have this hymn book right in the middle of the Bible. The majority, I would say, is what are the Psalms about? The Psalms are about giving Yahweh glory for who He is and for what He has done, and I'd even say for what He is doing and for what He will do in my life, in your life, in the lives of our forefathers and our mothers before us, and into the future for our children. It's all about praise and worship of who Yahweh is and what He has done, the great things He has done. The Psalms can be split into lots of different categories, shall we say, or different divisions. Now, they're a study within themselves, and I would say to you, my Ukrainian grandfather encouraged my mother and my father to read the Psalms daily, and he implanted upon them to, when they had children, that they would teach their children the Psalms. And my mum tells a story that every day my grandfather used to tell my mother, read the Psalms, read the Psalms, read the Psalms. When you have children, read the Psalms to your children, get your children to read the Psalms. So that was my grandfather, and he told my mother and my father, and my mother and father did that, and they did that with us, and me and my brothers, and we all read the Psalms, and they did that. So I'm admonishing you, I'm passing on from my grandfather and my mother and father through me to you, read the Psalms. I'd encourage you to read the Psalms, find the ones that really speak to you and sing to you. My favourites are Psalm 1, Psalm 24, Psalm 27, Psalm 51 I think is amazing, a Psalm of David, and Psalm 133. These are my favourites. I absolutely love them, but I suggest that you find your own. They are beautiful things to have every single day of your life. Find solace in them, find hope, find encouragement, find courage, find strength in them, and choose your own. Find your own. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, probably the most famous of all the Psalms. There you go. So the divisions. Homework, if you want some homework, I'm a teacher, what can I say? If you want some homework, look at the multiple divisions of the Psalms. They can be split into 5 books, and so on and so forth. But today I want to focus on just giving you a group of 7. So, 7 types of psalms are: there is a lament, prayers for God's deliverance. There is thanksgiving psalms, praise to Yahweh, praise to God for his gracious acts, his kindness, his loving mercy that endures forever. Enthronement psalms that describe the sovereignty and the sovereign role of Yahweh of hosts. Pilgrimage psalms, these are the psalms that were sung on the way up to Jerusalem to celebrate the feasts. Passover and unleavened, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then Shavuot, what you call Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles at the autumn of the year. The people would come from all over Israel, from Dan in the north, Beersheba in the south, from the east and from the west, and they'd come up to Jerusalem in their thousands, singing these psalms as they came along. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine the fellowships, all the fellowships of Stourbridge and the West Midlands going up to Birmingham and singing the praises of Yahweh as they went in their thousands? Manchester, London. Could you imagine the fellowships in those boroughs, in those areas, Greater Manchester, all the fellowships going up to Manchester singing the praises of Yahweh? Can you imagine that picture? Can you imagine the sound of it, singing the praises of Yahweh as they go? There are royal psalms. The royal psalms are the psalms between. There are instructions to the king and his role and his position and where he sits with Yahweh, and how Yahweh speaks to the king, and the king takes the word of Yahweh to the people, and he is the representative of Yahweh to the people, but also he's the representative of the people back to Yahweh through the king. So the people speak to the king and he goes back to Yahweh and makes supplication for the people. So royal psalms. Wisdom psalms. Psalms that are psalms of instruction that tell us how to live, how to be before Yahweh, how we should act and how we should behave. Psalm 1, my favourite, is one of those wisdom psalms. Then there are psalms of imprecation. These are the psalms that invoke Yahweh's wrath and his judgment on evil, on the enemies of God. There are other divisions, you can look into those if you want to. I'll just mention 2 more. The Hallel, Psalm 113 to 118 are called the Hallel, great songs of praise and worship before God. The Psalm 120 to 134 are called the songs of ascent, the Psalms of Ascent. Psalm 136 is called the Great Hallel. This is recited at the Passover meal when they sit down and they eat the Passover meal. This is the Great Hallel. And that's it for the descriptive work. Today we're going to focus on Psalm 96. Now I believe Psalm 96 is a psalm that is ascribed to Moses. He wrote Psalm 90 to 100, so Psalm 96 is one of Moses' psalms. If we look at this psalm, and I can split it into 3 sections. Okay, so it opens up with "Sing unto Yahweh a new song. All the earth, sing a song, sing and bless his name. Proclaim the good news, proclaim this gospel, this good news." What is this good news? His salvation, that Yahweh offers salvation. When should we do it? Day to day. Every day, day to day, proclaim the good news. Proclaim that salvation is in Yahweh, that salvation is available. It says, declare his glory among the nations, among the non-believers. Declare his wonders to the nations. Speak out that Yahweh reigns. He is the king. He reigns in his regality. For Yahweh is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared reverently. Makes a statement that all other gods are idols. Yahweh declares that Yahweh made the heavens and he made everything else. The fields and all that are in them, the earth, the sea and all that is in it. Talks about the trees. Then the trees will rejoice. It says, verse 8, I love this bit. Verse 8 says, give to Yahweh, give to God, give the glory due his name. Bring offerings. Coming to his courts. Coming into his courts speaks of being washed, being cleansed. It's about an attitude of approach. Because then the next verse says, worship in beauty and in holiness. Holiness is kadosh. It means to be set apart, separated. That you have no part with the evil, that you and evil have separated ways, and you are not taking part in the evil acts that are around you. You have kadosh in holiness, worship in beauty of holiness. So there's this thing about declaring who Yahweh is, and then your acts of adoration and worship for all the things that he has done. And then the last part of this psalm speaks of he shall judge the peoples righteously. He is coming to judge the earth. He shall judge the earth with righteousness, and all the people with truth. It says trembled before him. So this acknowledgement who Yahweh is, what he has done, and what he is going to do. These three sections. Now, something that's bothered me I've been a believer for 42 years, something that's bothered me probably for at least 35 of them, is I don't understand and I can't comprehend. Okay, my northern mind won't comprehend and doesn't understand how the peoples of the earth turned their back on Yahweh. I don't get it. I've struggled with it for a very long time and I still can't make sense of it. So if we look at the picture, Malcolm a couple of weeks ago did Noah, didn't he? So Noah gets on the ark. Noah builds the ark, takes his wife, his 3 sons and their wives onto the ark. There is absolutely no doubt that Yahweh is at work here. Noah knows who Yahweh is. You know, Ham, Shem and Japheth, the 3 brothers. Shem's 99, 100 years old when he gets on the ark. So he's not a child. He knows who Yahweh is. They've spent a long time building this ark. They didn't build it overnight. It took, in some places it says that, you know, it took between 80 and 120 years to build the ark. So all that time preparing for Yahweh's judgment, nobody listened. It's quite sad actually. But Ham, Shem and Japheth, Noah, the wives, get on the ark. Rains, we know what happened. Everything was destroyed. And they know who Yahweh is. Noah comes down, he sacrifices. And the rainbow comes. And then Ham, Shem and Japheth, they start to have children. And their children start to grow up. And they would teach their children about Yahweh. All these people knew, they knew and they knew and they knew, and the nations grew. Now, what happens? They grew so big they couldn't all stay together. So we know from ancient documentation that the 3 brothers kind of went in different directions. Okay, and the Bible teaches that. So Ham, with his firstborn son Canaan, leaves the place where they were, which is around Georgia, Armenia, Mount Ararat, where the ark had settled, and they went west. We know Canaan settled in the land of Canaan. That's why it was called Canaan, and they were called Canaanites. They were the offspring of Canaan. And then the other sons of Ham went down into Egypt. Mizraim became Egypt, and Put, and a couple of the others, which had different names, the Ethiopians. And that's who they became. Japheth takes his children and his family, and they travel northwest from Armenia and Georgia, and they go all the way across to Syria, what is Syria today, and then from Syria into Asia Minor, which is modern day Turkey, and then from there they go on to the islands, and the Greeks, and then the Romans come from, the later Latins come from this, and they spread out in that whole northern European, even up into Russia and Rus and Kiev and places like that eventually. Shem's children, tend to kind of stay close to their father, Noah, and then they travel down into the plains of the Tigris and the Euphrates River, what is today Iran and Iraq, those areas, ancient Persia, down in the Persian Gulf, and right down into that whole land space. Now they go down there, and what starts to happen there before they kind of stay there? There's the Babel incident, where all the nations are split up, and that helps to separate them all out. But Babel is quite important, because Babel is about where Nimrod encourages the people to defy Yahweh, to kind of turn their back on Yahweh. I'm always intrigued by the film Noah that came out a while back with Russell Crowe. That there's a character that Ray Winston plays, Tubal Cain, I think it is, and the attitude that he portrays towards God really has had me thinking for quite some years. Of like, is that the attitude that people have? That and if you watch it, look at this, look out for this attitude that he has. That they don't want to know God. These nations forget God. They forget the Creator. They forget all about Him. Is it in rebellion? Is it a refusal to acknowledge Him? Is it just sticking your head in the sand? Is the attitude, we don't need you, we don't want you? That's what you get from this way with this Tubal Cain character in Noah. But Nimrod carries this same kind of attitude in the building of Babel. It's not said, but in the building of Babel, there are two things that Babel is about. Babel is about, one, building a tower that will withstand the flood, should God flood the earth again. But Yahweh promised Noah that he wouldn't flood the earth again. And so, to a certain degree, Nimrod is calling Yahweh a liar, and encouraging all the peoples to call Yahweh a liar. But also, Babel's about rising above God. It is that Hasatan moment. It is that rebellion and war in heaven moment. This, we will storm the gates of heaven, and we will make gods of ourselves. We will become gods of ourselves. We will rule ourselves. So this is the attitude that comes across. And somehow this spreads into all the nations. Okay, so in this Psalm 96, it says, all the other gods are idols. Somehow, from the flood and from the Tower of Babel and everything that happened, they've forgotten God. They start to make idols, cast silver and gold, and carve them out of marble and lapis lazuli and all precious stones, and carve them from wood, and bow down and worship them, and give them names and give them backstories. I can't. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, and I still haven't come to any conclusion with it. But that's what happened. And what's left? What's left is the Semites, the children, some of the children of Shem. Now Asher departs from Nimrod when he starts all his business, and he goes and builds an empire. Assyria being his empire, and Nineveh being part of that kingdom. That later years that we know that Jonah went back to and preached the word to them. Perhaps it's because of that he rejected all that Nimrod was saying, and he still wanted to follow Yahweh. So that's this character called Asher. But the sons of Shem we know that Abraham was a descendant of Shem, and there are other books that are not attached to a modern Western day Bible that were part of the ancient scriptures that you'd find in the Septuagint, or you'd find in the Vulgate, the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees. And in these books there is a deeper description of the relationship that Abraham had, and Shem taught Abraham, and he brought him up in the ways of Yahweh. So Abraham knew who Yahweh was, and he knew who the true God was, and he knew who the Creator was. So when God took him out and led him on the path, he was one of this remnant that Scripture always talks about. There is this remnant that still follows Yahweh, and yeah. So what happens? We know what happens historically. Abraham goes, has his sons, has another son, has a son. Jacob has 12 sons. Go down to Egypt. The people are held in Egypt for over 400 years. They become a nation, and they come taken out of the land of Egypt in the Exodus, and they come into the land of Israel. Now it's I want to say that it's important. Yahweh is an absolute strategist. Consider and think where Yahweh placed Israel. He could have left them anywhere. He could have took them out of Egypt. He could have took them all the way down to the bottom of South Africa, to the tip of that piece of the land, to what we call South Africa today. Could have took them all down there. Why not? Why not take them into the heart of the Congo? Why not take them wherever? Why place them in this tiny little strip, what we call the Fertile Crescent? It's not called the Fertile Crescent for nothing, because it's very, very fertile. But he sticks his people in this Fertile Crescent. And what's important about this Fertile Crescent is it's a crossroads between all the great nations. To the south you've got Egypt, a great empire, a mighty empire that lasted for thousands of years, and was great, is to the south of Israel. And anytime the Egyptians wanted to trade or go anywhere else, where did they go? They went up the trade route, the Via Maris, the way of the sea, which runs up that coastline, and the Egyptians would come up, and what would they do? They would bypass Israel. They would bypass Jerusalem. They would bypass the children of Israel and all that they were doing in the worship of Yahweh. It wouldn't be unheard of. Israel were never sent out. There is never a time when Yahweh tells them to go out and tell everybody else. They were, if you would say, a lighthouse. They were a beacon set at this crossroads for everybody to see, and the light shone outwards. Like I said earlier, if you saw thousands and thousands of people going up to Jerusalem singing praises, it would be hard not to hear of and see that spectacle. So the Via Maris, okay, so also the crossroads to the north of Israel and north slightly westwards, you've got the Europeans, you've got the Greek nations, you've got Japheth and all his family growing up with the Greeks and the Hittites and those whole empires. And then to the east you have Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Media, the great empires of that side. And there the trade routes would come down, and they'd come down the King's Road for the war. So the Via Maris and then the King's Highway, they would go to war up the King's Highway. And quite often that happened in history. Alexander the Great came down the King's Road, and he bypassed, and he came through Israel, and he went to Egypt, and then he came back past Israel and then went out. Alexander the Great is the person who first came across the knowledge of the Hebrew scriptures, and he had it translated into Greek, and he took 70 Hebraic scribes down in Alexandria, and they copied the Bible into Greek. That's called the Septuagint. Septa means 70. So that's how it translated. The beacon that was Israel, those holy scriptures, he had them translated. Julius Caesar came down, Pompey Maxus came down. These great characters in history came down, and they came by Israel, and they saw what was going on. 3 of them entered the temple. 3 of them didn't live very long afterwards. A little bit more homework for you. They desecrated the temple, and not long afterwards they were dead. So, coming back to Psalm 96 and about this psalm, declaring to the nations, Israel were never sent out, but they were a light in a very, very dark place. And the light shone out to the whole world. The trade routes came through, the war routes came through, these great people in history came through, and it was known who Yahweh was. They declared the greatness. Let me read to you something I was looking at. Joshua 9 verse 9. Alright, talks about the Gibeonites. When Joshua went into the land after the death of Moses, and they were taking the land, this group of people who had heard, it says, because of the name of Yahweh your God, your Elohim, we have heard of his fame and all that he did in Egypt. They'd heard, they knew what God had done for Israel. The beacon shone brightly. The word spread. It went out. This gospel, this good news, and the Psalms are Israel's way of declaring and stating, "This is our God. This is who we worship. This is what He has done for us. This is what He did. He is the Creator." Yeah. Creation declares His glory. Birdsong, trees, the fruit, Everything declares the glory of Yahweh. How can you have forgotten? How can you still be in rebellion? Do you refuse to acknowledge Yahweh? You don't need him, you don't want him, you don't want to know him, and yet everything around you, your stone idols and your wooden idols, they didn't do this. Yahweh did this. And therefore they try to live their lives holy. And then they also would state that this Yahweh will come in judgment again. The flood. You may have tried to put that out of your memory and out of your mind, but this flood, this judgment of Yahweh will come again. And we are telling you, we are the beacon that shines out from this place to tell you that God will judge his people in righteousness. The whole earth. He's coming to judge the whole earth. He'll judge the whole earth with righteousness. He'll judge all the peoples with truth. You can't get away from this. So again, Israel sits in the heart of this, and these psalms are spoken and they declare the glory of Yahweh. And I want to close it today by saying to you, are you? Well, we should all be psalmists. We're all psalmists. We all have the ability to be psalmists. What has Yahweh done for you? What are the songs that you can sing? And I'm not saying you have to be a singer. It's not like the X Factor or something. I can't sing for nothing. I'm not a good singer at all. But the principle behind, if I could write a song to Yahweh, if I could write down what are the things that I would write about what Yahweh has done for me. I am seeing the miraculous almost every day in my life at the moment because of something I'm involved in. That's something that has come about through a lot of prayer, and it's absolutely amazing to watch. And I almost feel like I'm in this place where there is a cloud before me, or a pillar of fire by day and by night, and cloud by day, that it feels like that. And I can't deny the work of Yahweh in and around me and in my life and the life of others. So I can be a psalmist and say, God is doing great things. God has done great things. I can look back to the past and say amazing things that Yahweh has done. And I can look to my own life. We should all be able to look to our own lives and say, this is what God has done for me. This is what God is doing for me. This is what I will ask of my God. You know, what is the good news? Declare his glory, declare his good news and his wonders among the nations, among the Gentiles, those that don't believe. Are you a psalmist in your community, in your workplace, in your daily life? Are you a psalmist? Are you singing his praises? What do you have to sing about before God? We should all have something to declare. Okay? Even if it's just, where is it says that if we his people do not praise God, the very stones, the very bricks in the wall will rise up and praise him. There is that. So it's a duty of ours to give glory due to Yahweh's name, bringing him offerings, to come before him and worship him and give thanks. And we can all be psalmists. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be. And I want to leave you with that. Think about that. Think about what you have to give thanks to Yahweh about. What glory can you give him for your life? The mission of Yahweh in the Psalms is for his name to be spread abroad, to bring to memory, to recall who he is, the creator of all things. He created the earth, and it's his to do with as he chooses. I'll say this. I think one of the most powerful things that has ever been said to me in my life was by an old prophet who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But the most powerful thing that I ever heard him say was a very, very simple evangelistical preach. It was very, very simple. It wasn't deep at all. But he finished by saying, talking about Yeshua, talking about Jesus, he said, imagine life without him. I found that exceptionally powerful, and I still do. You and I wake up every day with Yahweh on our side, knowing Yeshua, having the Bible at our fingertips. We wake up every day with him. We get into bed, and he's with us. We know. We can call on his name if we choose to do so. Now, I am sure, okay, that there are days when you really don't want to get out of bed. There are days when you just don't want to face stuff. You and I have days like that. I'm sure other people have days like that. On those days that you feel like that, you have God, you have Jesus with you. Imagine life without him. Look to the millions who wake up every day without what you and I have, without that assurity, without that knowledge, without that Jesus, without God to turn to. Imagine waking up without him. If there are days when we struggle to get out of bed, what is it like for those people who have none of that? And so the mission of God in the Psalms is for his praises to be sung, for his praises to be heard, for you and for I to be beacons that shine in dark, dark places to the people who've forgotten who God is, forgotten who Yahweh is, forgotten that he's the Creator, for people who are still in rebellion, whose hearts have been hardened, and they come with the attitude, they refuse to acknowledge who Yahweh is, and their attitude is, we don't need you, we don't want you, we can do this by ourselves. We know that a judgment is coming, and if they remain in that rebellious state, if they remain in that refusal to acknowledge in the attitude that we don't want you, Yahweh, we don't need you, Yahweh, we don't care, we'll do it by ourselves, they will face this judgment and they will tremble before him. The mission from the Psalms is to declare his glory in all the earth, wherever we go, whatever we do, whoever we bump into, to make declarations, to sing a new song day to day, proclaim the good news, proclaim his salvation. He saved me, he saved you. He wants to save them. It's all about relationship, isn't it? Yahweh wants the restoration of relationship. He does not want those people to forget. He doesn't want them to live in forgetfulness. He doesn't want them to live in rebellion. He's not happy that they refuse to acknowledge him. He's not happy that they have the attitude that we don't need you and we don't want you, we'll do it by ourselves. He wants relationship. Everything is out of love. So he loves you and I, and he shows us that love and that mercy and kindness, and we reciprocate it, we warm to that. That's what he wants from the others. The mission of the Psalms is to bring back into the minds of the nations and the hearts of the nations that this is the living Elohim, this is the living God, this is the Creator who is full of love and compassion and mercy and desires restoration with the peoples of the earth. And that's it. Shabbat Shalom. That's all I have from this. There is so much more that you can glean from this. Take it, read lots of the Psalms. Again, I admonish you to do that and pick your own, pick your favourites that you carry around with you every day that are there to encourage you on a daily basis. And you know what? Share them with others. Share why they have become your favourites and what speaks to them for you. Okay? Shabbat Shalom. Enjoy the rest of your week. Okay, bye-bye.